Right, I want to talk to you today about an interesting piece of audio equipment. I'd call it hi-fi equipment, which is what I'm using it as, but it wasn't really designed as that. It's got a specific professional use case, and it turns out that a lot of the most interesting audio equipment that I've come across has been stuff that hasn't really been aimed at a normal consumer, more at someone that's doing a specific job, a professional. For example, the best cassette Walkman I've got for performance is the Sony WM-D6C, and this was primarily aimed at reporters, but it's a very capable cassette Walkman. Now, when it comes to compact disc players, I've shown you a couple of interesting ones over the years. For example, this is the Superscope PSD-300, a twin deck unit, uniquely capable. Very interesting look to it as well. Something appeals to me about something with a load of buttons on it, as long as those buttons actually have a function. Talking of which, I've also shown another CD player in the past on this channel, which is the Technics SL-DZ1200, and that's my CD player that I use most of the time. Now, when these professional components aren't of any use anymore to the professionals, for whatever reason, they've moved on to newer technologies, these things often end up getting sold on eBay. And that's where I end up coming in and picking these things up and repurposing them for use in the home. And that's what I've got today. Let me show it to you. There it is. This is a scale model, rather obviously, of the machine I'm going to show you. I'll just put the CD in if it fits in the front there. There we go. This is the Technics SL-DZ1200. And you know, a piece of audio equipment is going to be something a little bit special when it's got its own scale model. But let me just get the proper one out. There you go. And this is what Technics call a direct drive digital turntable. So it's a compact disc player with a rotating 10-inch quartz locked platter on the top. And that's not the kind of thing that you tend to see every day. So I thought it's worth taking a look at this one. To explain where this came from, we need to go back a little bit first and talk about record players. When it came to playing records in a live environment, the Technics SL-1200 range are a very popular turntable with DJs. The original SL-1200 was launched in 1972, the Mark II came along in 1979, and this one added in quartz lock as well as a new slider control rather than a knob to adjust the pitch. But of course, things moved on. By the early 2000s, DJs wanted to use CDs for their sets. They needed a CD player that had DJ functionality, and Pioneer's CDJ1000 became a very popular machine to use for this purpose. By 2003, the Pioneer CDJ was already onto its Mark II version, and a lot of people were wondering when Technics were going to get into this game. What were the leaders in the analog DJ field going to bring to the new digital DJ world? Better late than never, in 2004, Technics brought out their SL-DZ1200, which was a digital SL-1200 designed to bring the look and feel of the classic model into the modern era. It used the same quartz lock direct drive as the record player, but the 10-inch platter on this was just a means of controlling the playback of the CD, which was loaded in via a slot in the front. From the tone of this awkwardly translated FAQ, it seems that they're slightly miffed by the success of the rival products that were already on the market. They state that unlike the so-called CDJ, the DZ1200 is a turntable based on a totally new concept. For many analog DJs who have stayed away from digital materials such as CDs, the DZ1200 is a tool that enables musical performances out of a large variety of digital materials in an analog style without odd feeling. The idea seems to have merit. If you spent countless hours honing your DJ skills on an SL-1200, you probably want something that felt roughly similar for playing CDs. Now, apparently the original selling price in 2004 was $1,200 US, which is equivalent to around about $2,000 US nowadays. Now, my SLP-1200, that was designed for radio DJs. The SL-DZ1200, this is for club DJs. And as it's going to become painfully obvious during the course of this video, I'm no DJ. However, I'm going to try and do my best to demonstrate how this thing works. So, let's get on with it. Now, Now there's so many features on here, I'm sure I'm going to miss a couple out, but I'll try and show you as many of them as I can. We'll start off with that turntable platter. It's supposed to simulate the feeling of directly manipulating a record, but we're really just operating a controller for the compact disc.
I know you told your friend you're not okay. And tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. Guess you're trying to stay strong. You're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away.
What's going on here is that you're moving a plastic disc that rides slightly proud of the turntable base. If I remove that disc, you can see that the previous owner for this stuck it down with some double-sided tape. Now this is just a thin piece of plastic. The actual simulation of a record is done by the grey coloured platter that it was stuck to. Once it's reassembled, you'll note that the disc has a thin line marked on it to assist with cueing to a specific part of a track. Right, now let's move on to the tempo and pitch control. There's no centered detent on this slider, but the control is locked out whenever the reset light is lit.
All of a sudden I don't look at anything the same way. Gotta build up of my thoughts sitting in an ashtray. I'm sorry that I'm so inconvenient, okay. Just let me be me and I'll stay out of your way.
I can see the way you look at me, I'm such a disgrace. I never really asked to be brought into this place. You wanna love me, well then baby I would taste.
The current speed variation is displayed on the screen as well.
I really wanna hurt you, but I can't control the pain. If you're sticking by my side, maybe we could be okay. Okay, maybe you could be the change
I need today.
Now let's try that again, but this time with the pitch lock engaged.
About to fade away, cause every time I wake up I feel like it's Monday. Something's going wrong with all the chemicals up in my brain. All of a sudden I don't look at anything the same way. Gotta build up of my thoughts sitting in an ashtray. I'm sorry that I'm so inconvenient, okay. Just let me be me and I'll stay out of your way. I can see the way you look at me, I'm such a disgrace.
If you've ever had the desire to play your CDs in reverse, well, this is the machine for you. You could do it by spinning the platter in reverse, or you could just flip the reverse switch.
I feel like I'm losing my mind.
If you want a more immediate change, then activate the instant change button. You never know, this feature might come in handy at some point.
It's your primitive is when yet. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. It's your primitive is when yet. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it.
Moving on to the sample pads, these let you quickly access 4 snippets of saved audio. Here's some audio that I've captured to these from CDs played in the machine.
Y'all ready for this? Yeah, just hit me.
You can also load the samples from or save them to an SD card, and if you want you can trim them down with the controls in the middle, and you can choose whether or not you want to loop them. It will let you play 2 samples at the same time, and of course you can play samples alongside the CD that's playing as well. I think it's time for a quick demo bringing a few of these things together. We're going to need a suitable thing to sample, so here's Charles Aznavour. Okay, well that's the original version, but I think more people here might be familiar with it if it was being played at a slower speed. So let's slow it down by about 25%. Okay, so now I'm going to sample it being played back at that speed, and I'm going to store it in position number 1. Okay, well that's the basic sample, but I need to clean it up a bit. I need to take off the silence at the beginning, I need to take off the bit at the end to make sure it all loops cleanly, and also I need to select that this is a sample that will be played as a loop rather than just a one-off. Okay, so now I've got it looping cleanly, let's put a different CD in and mix that in with the sample. And there you go, a completely out of time mess. So let's move on to looping a CD. You can pick an in and an out point, and the CD will repeat this section cleanly. And I can see how a skilled DJ would use this, perhaps repeating a break or a particular part of a song just to keep it playing for a little bit longer.
There's no mercy in this world, just hunger-thirsty persons in different versions. Each new update, that shit worsens. Why? Pull back the curtain and you'll see the different vermin. Why? Pull back the curtain and you'll see the different vermin. Why? Pull back the curtain and you'll see the different vermin. We all have different burdens that all seem to cause disturbance. Why? Pull back the curtain and you'll see the different vermin. We all have different burdens that all seem to cause disturbance.
Back up to the top left there, we've got cue pads. These are effectively parts of the disc that you bookmark that you want instant access to at the push of a button. So just to round out this section, I'm going to put a different CD in, and I'm going to fill in the sample and the cue pads with selections that I've taken from the disc, and then I'm going to run through them all. And also bear in mind that these selections can later be recalled from an SD card. Now, to me, everything seems fine with that. I'm having a lot of fun playing around with this. But then again, I'm not a professional DJ. I'm just some chump messing about. And looking back at the information from the time that this came out, it seems like this was a highly anticipated device that ultimately failed to live up to expectations. It seems that DJs have some very specific and exacting requirements, and this did not live up to them. They reported upon things like digital distortion when you're using the pitch control. Also, they said there was a tiny dead zone between going forward and back. Not something that I can feel, but I'm sure it's there if they've reported on it. Also, the top platter section, they reckon that could slip a little bit out of position, so your cue would be a little bit out. Just tiny fractions of a second in these things, but it matters to people who care about this kind of stuff. And this thing was just a little bit too vague for someone who requires extreme precision. And it appears there are also some weird operational quirks. Not the kind of thing, again, that I'd noticed, but if you were using this professionally to earn a living, I'm sure those kind of things will get on your nerves pretty quickly. There are some limitations that I'm better able to appreciate, like for example, it will only play back MP3s of up to 192 kilobits a second, and the maximum size SD card it will accept is 1 gigabyte. And then to read and write to that SD card with a computer, you needed to use special software as well as a specific Panasonic card reader that cost another $150. And it wouldn't help that at the time this product came out, the Technics brand was getting folded back into Panasonic, and a lot of the Technics products around the world were getting discontinued. So I'm quite sure within the Technics umbrella, there wasn't really enough budget or resources there to be able to either support this properly or work on a follow-up. So in summary, as far as the DJ market was concerned, the SL-DZ1200 was a bit of a disappointment. It was a decent first attempt, but that's all it was. However, there was no second attempt, there were no updates to the product range, there were no further products in this line at all from Technics. Instead, it was rival manufacturers like Pioneer with their CDJs that continued to dominate the market. Now, whilst most of the problems that DJs experienced pass me by, I can tell that it's by no means a perfectly thought out device. For example, the screen is dense with information, but it's often very difficult to read. It's only really legible from directly overhead. Any off-axis viewing is quite problematic, and the refresh rate on it is slow as well. However, if you want to control the functions such as editing the samples or loading and saving banks of settings, you're going to have to use that screen. During normal playback, it also shows some useful information as well. For example, after a short delay, it will show the current beats per minute of the song that's being played. And you can also show either the elapsed or the remaining time for the track, and there's also a nice little progress bar under that time display. Also, when the track gets within 30 seconds of the end, the time will flash. But all of this is very hard to see unless you're directly overhead. You might have noticed the button on the right that's labelled Display Angle. Unfortunately, that doesn't tilt the screen, instead it rotates the information displayed to suit the user's preference. There was a company in the UK who could modify your machine by taking out the display section and mounting it on a stand so that it was easier to view. I don't know if they're still offering this service because they're on Facebook, and I'm as likely to visit a Facebook page as I am to visit North Korea. If we take a look around the back, you can see, amongst other things, we've got a 1/4-inch headphone socket here, as well as a coax digital output. The only unusual controls are a mode switch and a brake knob. Now, I'll talk about the function of the mode switch in a few minutes, but first I want to give you a quick demo of how the brake control affects the responsiveness of the turntable to come to a halt. Now, I bought mine a year ago. It's in really good condition and it came with the original box, but it cost me around about £350. Now, sometimes on eBay, people will sell them in pairs, and if you were to get those and work out the cost per unit, quite often it's somewhere between £200 to £300 per item. So if you were to buy a pair, you could perhaps sell one of them on, or maybe go halves with a friend. Now, I think it's important to mention that if you were to go and buy one of these second-hand, say from eBay, you're not depriving a DJ of some important piece of equipment that they need to do their job. No, they've moved on from these things. In fact, they're the ones who are selling them. Remember, when this came out 18 or so years ago, it didn't really get brilliant reviews back then, and then we've had 18 years of technological development with regard to DJ music controllers since then. So these things are very out of date now. In fact, when I went looking online just to see what kind of things you can get like this now, turns out they've dropped the CD player aspect. They're just using digital files now. Shows you what I know about being a DJ. So yeah, this thing is well out of date now. So really, I've just bought an out-of-date piece of equipment that a DJ wouldn't use anymore due to its limitations, but those limitations mean nothing to me because I'm using this as a compact disc player for the home, an incredibly cool-looking compact disc player with a load of additional features. Right, as promised, let's get back to that mode switch on the back that selects between two modes, CD player and turntable. What's the difference? Well, I've been using this in turntable mode so far, and I thought my stop switch was broken. It turns out that it's working fine. In turntable mode, it operates as a cue control rather than a stop button. If you want to stop the playback in this mode, you're going to have to press the pause key. Oh, and before I switch over to the CD mode, I'll mention that the moving turntable does have a fully functional strobe. If the centre dots appear stationary, then tempo is normal. If it's the top row, then it's about 3.5% fast, and if it's the bottom, it's 3.5% slow. But you'll lose this functionality if you switch it into the CD mode, because that turns off the rotating disc as well as any interaction between the turntable controller and the CD playback. On the positive side, the stop button works like a stop button now, so you can just use it as a normal CD player. You've got all your basic controls, play and stop, track skip forward and back, fast forward and rewind. You've got an eject button on the front. It's all very normal, but of course, if you want normal, you're probably not going to be buying this. One unusual quirk of being in CD player mode, though, is that it gives you more control over the effects. Now, I haven't mentioned these yet as they're pretty pointless, but yeah, it does have some built-in effects options. When you're in the CD player mode, the turntable acts as a controller to interact with some of these to alter the effect, but they're still uninspiring and a bit useless. far more use though are the various vinyl simulator options. Now these apply various equalizations in an attempt to simulate some aspects of the sound signature of a vinyl record, as well as some other devices. Now whilst many of the options are gimmicky, the first two do have a nice tone to them, so much so that it's possible you might prefer to play back your CDs with one of these modes activated. Of course, one thing to mention about DJ equipment is that it really does take quite a bit of a hammering and gets a lot of use, although a lot of it's carried around in flight cases as well. It might be a good idea to look for one with its own flight case. At least it shows it's been protected over the years. The fact that there are so many of these still around, even though they don't seem to have been all that popular back in the day, seems to indicate to me that they're pretty resilient devices. It seems very well constructed, it's very heavy, but of course it's a usual thing with any piece of old technology that there's no promises that this thing isn't going to die the day after you bought it. You can still get some spares for them though. If your control disc on the top here was all scratched up, you can get replacements for those from a third party, and there is a company out there that's repurposing old vinyl records and putting the appropriate cutouts in them so that it fits on the top of here to give you that proper vinyl feel, if that's what you're looking for. So there you go. If you're in the market for a unique looking compact disc player with some very unusual features, then maybe you want to consider the Technics SL-DZ1200. Now, of course, I'm going to put an affiliated eBay search link in the video description, but I would suggest just holding on a little bit, trying to get the best one at the lowest price. After all, if I'd have waited a year, I could have saved about £100 on what I paid for this one. But also bear in mind that there aren't an infinite number of these things around, so at some point there won't be any for sale at all. And again, no promises whether the one you get is going to keep working for more than about 5 minutes. But I hope this one does. And that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.